The voice sliced through the warm hush of first class like a blade. "Sir, you'll need to vacate the seat immediately." Jordan Ellis looked up slowly, his expression composed, though his heart thudded once hard inside his chest. The flight attendant stood over him, tall, immaculate, her dark hair pulled into a sleek bun. The silver wings pinned to her uniform glinted in the soft cabin lights, but her eyes held no warmth. Behind her loomed 2 uniformed security officers, each shifting their weight too close to their holstered tasers. Row 2A, the premium window seat, was his. He had booked it weeks ago, confirmed the ticket twice, and paid full fare. The embossed e-ticket sat neatly folded in his leather briefcase, the same one that had accompanied him into every boardroom battle of his career. Yet in this moment, with dozens of eyes in first class fixed on him, it was as though none of that mattered. Jordan drew a slow, steady breath. "This seat is mine," he said, his baritone calm but firm. "Purchased 3 weeks ago. Fully confirmed." A ripple went through the cabin. Passengers shifted, some curious, some amused, most eager to pretend they weren't watching. The heavy-set man across the aisle raised a champagne glass to his lips and smirked, as if the scene unfolding was entertainment. A woman 2 rows up ducked her head quickly, choosing to scroll her phone instead of bearing witness. The flight attendant, her badge read Ramirez, tilted her head and forced a brittle smile. "Sir, a VIP is boarding. This seat is required. We'll be happy to reassign you to economy and provide a voucher." The words dropped like a hammer. Economy, voucher, as if he were some late, desperate passenger who had stumbled into the wrong world. Jordan felt his muscles tighten beneath his charcoal gray suit. He had worn it deliberately today. Tailored wool, deep purple silk tie, polished shoes, because this wasn't just another flight. This was the day he was to finalize a $120 million investment in Skirich Airlines, the very company that now stood poised to humiliate him in front of an entire cabin. Hours ago, he had sat in the terminal lounge, scrolling through documents, watching the first $25 million transfer hit his phone screen. That money, his money, was the only thing standing between Skirich and financial collapse. And here he was, told he did not belong in seat 2A. He glanced down at his phone. A single swipe, a single tap, and he could reverse the wire transfer. He imagined the chaos that would follow, the panic in the boardroom, the stock dipping before markets even closed. The thought flickered across his mind like a flame, but he didn't move. Not yet. Instead, he lifted his gaze and fixed it on Ramirez. "This seat is mine," he repeated, each word deliberate and measured. "I'm not going anywhere." The air in the cabin grew heavy. The engines outside had not yet spooled to life, and in the silence, Jordan could hear the shallow breaths of passengers nearby, the faint click of phone cameras activating. The moment was being recorded. Witness. Ramirez's smile faltered. She turned her head slightly, and the 2 security officers stepped forward, their presence looming larger. A warning. A threat. "Sir," one of them said, voice low, "you can come quietly or we can escalate." Jordan tilted his head, his glasses catching the soft amber light overhead. He thought of the nights in South Chicago when his mother, exhausted from 3 jobs, would whisper to him, "Don't let anyone erase you, Jordan. They will try. They will tell you where you don't belong. Show them you exist." He placed his hand calmly on his briefcase. "You'll have to drag me out," he said, "because this seat is mine." A collective gasp rippled through the cabin. The smirk vanished from the heavy-set man's face. Phones were lifted higher now, tiny red lights blinking. Passengers who pretended not to watch were now riveted, eyes darting between the uniformed officers and the calm, unyielding man in the window seat. For a heartbeat, silence ruled. Then a new voice pierced it, smooth, oily, dripping with disdain. "What kind of nonsense is this?" A tall man in a pinstripe suit filled the aisle, briefcase swinging arrogantly from one hand. Preston Hale, senior lobbyist and VIP guest of Skirich Airlines, the one for whom Jordan's seat was being stolen. His cheeks flushed with irritation as his eyes locked on Jordan. "That seat," Preston said loudly, "is mine." Ramirez straightened, emboldened by his presence. "Mr. Hale is a valued guest of our board. We require your cooperation." The murmur in the cabin swelled. Some passengers nodded subtly, as if the world made sense again. Of course the seat was for someone like Hale, not the quiet black man with the leather case. Others looked away, ashamed but unwilling to intervene. Jordan lifted his head, meeting Preston's stare. His voice, when it came, was low, steady, and carried across the cabin with the weight of steel. I paid for this seat, and I belong exactly where my ticket says, Seat 2A. Preston let out a sharp laugh. Some people truly belong in first class, he said, his voice pitched just high enough for everyone to hear. And some do not. The words hung in the air, thick as smoke. A few passengers shifted uncomfortably, but no one spoke. Silence was safer. Complicity was easier. Jordan felt the heat rise inside him, but his face remained calm. He thought of the contracts waiting in his suitcase, the deal that would decide the airline's fate. They believed he was just another passenger, easily moved, easily silenced. They didn't know that he was the storm they had just summoned. Ramirez's forced smile hardened into something sharper. She glanced at the officers, who now stepped closer, hands brushing their tasers. "Sir," she said, voice taut, "this is a security issue. You need to move now." Jordan's gaze swept the cabin one last time. Faces turned away. Eyes dropped to screens. Only the faint red glows of recording phones bore witness. He lifted his briefcase slowly, his movements deliberate. He stood, towering, his presence commanding even in the act of yielding. The humiliation pressed on him like iron, but his stride was measured as he stepped into the aisle. Passengers leaned back as he passed, giving him space as though he carried contagion. Whispers hissed around him. Must have been a fake ticket. Probably trouble. Doesn't belong here. Seat 2A vanished behind him. Row 34 waited ahead, cramped, suffocating. Every step away from first class weighed heavy. But with each one, Jordan's fury sharpened. They thought they had stripped him of his dignity. They thought they had erased him from the picture. But Jordan Ellis knew better. He slid into the narrow economy seat, knees pressed against the tray table, shoulders tight against strangers. The humiliation burned hot in his chest, but beneath it, a colder fire ignited. If Skirich thought they could reduce him to silence, they were about to learn that humiliation, when handed to the wrong man, could become the spark of catastrophe. The cabin settled back into its artificial calm. Preston reclined smugly in 2A, clinking his champagne glass with Ramirez. The security officers retreated. The passengers resumed their silence. But Jordan Ellis sat still, eyes fixed out the window, jaw set like stone. The engines roared to life, and the plane surged forward. They had humiliated him in first class. But before this flight was through, Jordan Ellis would begin the chain of events that would cost Skirich Airlines $120 million and bring its empire to its knees. If you are enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. The economy seat dug into Jordan Ellis's knees, pressing his long legs against the tray table in front of him. The thin cushion barely disguised the cold metal beneath. Every shift of his shoulders brushed against the strangers on either side. The air smelled faintly of recycled coffee and sweat, a far cry from the polished champagne and leather atmosphere of first class he had left behind. The humiliation still clung to him like smoke. Around him, a silence pressed in, the kind that was not really silence at all, but a thousand whispers trapped behind lowered eyes. A few rows ahead, he caught the glow of a passenger's phone screen. A shaky video of him being escorted out of 2A was already making its way across social media. He knew it without needing to check. Jordan closed his eyes for a moment, taking a breath so deep it seemed to scrape the bottom of his lungs. The rage was still there, a low, simmering fire. But behind it, memory began to stir, old, sharp-edged recollections that explained why this moment burned so deeply. He was 12 years old again, standing in the middle of a cramped kitchen in South Chicago. The wallpaper peeled in long, curling strips. The floor tiles were cracked, the edges curling like broken teeth. His mother, Alma Ellis, stood by the sink in her faded uniform, her eyes red from exhaustion but still fierce. She slid a plate of eggs and toast in front of him, though he knew she hadn't eaten herself. "You listen to me, Jordan," she said, brushing a curl of hair from his forehead. They will try to tell you you don't belong. They will try to make you feel small. But you hear me? You don't let them. You stand tall. Always. That night, after working 2 shifts back to back, she had still found time to sit by his bedside and place a worn library book in his hands. The autobiography of Malcolm X. He had devoured it, sentence by sentence, not just for the story, but because it carried the message his mother had drilled into him, that a man's worth was not decided by the world's prejudices, but by the strength he built for himself. At 17, the guidance counselor at his high school had leaned back in his chair, peering at Jordan over wire-rimmed glasses. The man's voice had been casual, almost kind. College isn't really for you, Jordan. You're a good kid, but plumbing or auto work, those are safer paths. Practical paths. Jordan had stared at him in silence, feeling the words etch themselves into his skin like acid. Practical paths. Safe paths. Paths designed to keep him boxed in, away from the places men, like his counselor, believed he didn't belong. That night, he stayed up until dawn, hunched over borrowed prep books, grinding through SAT practice questions until his eyes blurred. Months later, when the acceptance letter from Harvard Business School arrived, he had placed it gently on his mother's pillow. She wept, clutching it to her chest as though it were proof that all her sacrifices had not been in vain. Harvard had not welcomed him with open arms. He still remembered the whispers during orientation week, the smug voice of a classmate asking, "So, did you get on affirmative action?" Jordan had smiled tightly, swallowing the sting, and resolved that he would answer every doubt not with words, but with results. He rose to the top of his class, not because it was easy, but because he refused to give anyone the satisfaction of watching him stumble. He pulled longer hours, asked sharper questions, and when others left for parties, he stayed in the library, drilling into case studies until dawn. By graduation, the same classmates who had doubted him now sought him out for advice. Still, even armed with a degree and credentials, the world made him prove himself again and again. At 25, he walked into a downtown bank with a meticulously polished business plan for his first venture. The director flipped through the pages, expression flat. Finally, the man set the binder aside, folding his hands on the desk. "It's a good idea," he said, "but we don't think you fit the image we're looking for." Jordan had walked out into the freezing Chicago wind, the rejection letter like lead in his briefcase. His dream, his plan, his months of work, dismissed not for merit, but for perception. That night, he stood outside a shuttered laundromat, his reflection staring back from the glass, and swore to himself, never again will I let someone else define my worth. It took 15 years of clawing, grinding, and building brick by brick, but by 43, Jordan Ellis had become the CEO of Summit Capital, a multi-billion-dollar investment firm. His company employed more than 200 people, 40% of them women or people of color, those who had been overlooked just as he once was. He funded scholarships in South Chicago. He built a mentorship pipeline for students who had been told they didn't belong. Every deal he closed, every contract signed, was more than money. It was proof that he could not be erased, proof that his mother's whispers had not been wasted. And now, here he sat, in row 34 of a Skirich Airlines flight, pressed between strangers, forced out a seat he had paid for. The irony was almost unbearable. The deal on his phone screen, the $120 million lifeline for the airline, had been months in the making. Endless nights of negotiation, endless calculations, all leading to this flight. Without his capital, Skirich would collapse. And yet, the airline had treated him as though he were no one, as though he were invisible. Jordan opened his eyes and stared at the seat back inches from his face. His reflection stared back from the tiny, scratched plastic screen, his jaw set, his eyes burning. He thought of his mother again. He could almost hear her voice as clearly as if she were sitting beside him in the cramped row. "Don't let them erase you. Stand tall. Always." The humiliation he felt in 2A was real, but it was not new. He had been here before, in countless forms. The counselor's smirk, the banker's dismissal, the whispers at Harvard. Every time, he had transformed that sting into steel. This time would be no different. Jordan unclenched his fist slowly, his fingers leaving faint crescents in his palms. He drew a deliberate breath, calming himself. He knew the world had already begun watching. Passengers had filmed the confrontation. Social media would carry it farther than the walls of his cabin ever could. He leaned back in the suffocating seat and allowed a faint, cold smile to flicker across his lips. They thought they had silenced him. They thought they had stripped him of dignity. But they had no idea who he was. Jordan Ellis was not just a passenger. He was the man who held the fate of their entire airline in his hands. And soon, the humiliation of Seat 2A would ignite a storm that no one at Skerridge could contain. The engines roared beneath the wings, but inside row 34 the real turbulence had already begun. Jordan Ellis sat rigid, his leather briefcase balanced on his lap, his eyes locked on the dim glow of his phone. The screen flashed with notifications, first dozens, then hundreds. Videos of him being forced out of 2A were spreading at breakneck speed. One clip, taken from 2 rows back, showed him seated calmly as 2 security officers loomed over him. The caption read, "Black man forced out of first class for a white VIP passenger." Already the comments streamed in. Unbelievable. This is 2025, not 1955. Name the airline. We'll make sure they pay. Who is he? He handled that with so much dignity. Jordan's stomach tightened. He hadn't asked for the spotlight, but he knew its power. His humiliation was no longer confined to a cabin of 200 passengers. It was now in the palms of thousands, and soon millions. He glanced sideways at the aisle seat. The heavy-set man who had muttered earlier now leaned closer, voice low. "I filmed the moment they told you to move. If you need it, I'll send you the clip." Jordan turned to meet his eyes. The steel in his gaze softened for the first time since the confrontation. "Thank you. That means more than you know." The man nodded, fumbling with his phone, and within seconds, Jordan received the file. He forwarded it to a secure email server, his fingers moving with precision. Every shred of proof would matter. He wasn't just gathering receipts. He was building a case. Up ahead in first class, Preston Hale sipped his champagne, reclining smugly. His booming laugh carried down the aisle like static. "See? My seat stays clean. Can't have people like that dirtying it." Jordan didn't need to hear it. 3 different passengers had already recorded Preston's sneer and uploaded it. The phrase "people like that" was rapidly turning into a rallying cry online, a meme of outrage. Meanwhile, Graham Lockwood sat stiffly beside Preston, phone buzzing nonstop in his hand. Messages from Skerridge's PR team exploded on the screen. Viral clip spreading. Crisis in progress. We need immediate response. Do not confirm his identity until cleared. Sweat dotted Graham's temple. He had meant for the humiliation to be swift and quiet, a small exertion of power in the name of protecting his VIP. Instead, it was spiraling into a corporate nightmare. In the economy cabin, Jordan leaned back, his eyes scanning the endless stream of tweets, reposts, and live streams. The hashtag surged like wildfire. Hashtag justice for Jordan. Hashtag not removed while black. Hashtag Skerridge scandal. One clip in particular, shaky but powerful, showed him refusing to leave seat 2A, his voice calm and resolute. "This seat I paid for. I'm not going anywhere." The dignity in his tone contrasted starkly with the aggression of the officers beside him. Within 30 minutes, the clip hit 500,000 views. By the hour mark, it had passed 2 million. Jordan closed his eyes, inhaling deeply. He could feel the shift. Humiliation was transforming into ammunition. His story was no longer his alone. It had become a public reckoning. Memories came rushing back again. He thought of his mother, of the night she whispered, "Don't let them erase you." He thought of that cold day outside the bank when his first business plan was rejected. He thought of every time he had been underestimated, dismissed, told he didn't belong. Now, the world was watching the same old story play out again, but this time it was on camera. This time, there would be no erasing, no silence. In first class, Graham leaned toward Chloe Ramirez, his voice sharp. "We need to contain this. Spin it. Say he was disruptive. Say passengers complained." Chloe shifted uncomfortably, eyes flicking down the aisle to where Jordan sat, silent but unbowed. But he wasn't disruptive. He was calm the entire time. Graham hissed, "Doesn't matter. People believe what we tell them. Just plant the seed." But already, that seed was too late to take root. Passenger after passenger uploaded clips, each one proving Jordan's composure, each one dismantling Graham's lie before it could breathe. Jordan's phone buzzed again. A message from Tiana Brooks, COO of Summit Capital. "Tiana, Jordan, the video is everywhere. News outlets are calling nonstop. Do we respond?" "Jordan, not yet. Let them reveal themselves first. Then we'll strike." He placed the phone back on his lap, his fingers tracing the edge of the leather case. His mind was clear now, cold and precise. The humiliation had hurt, but it had also crystallized his strategy. Skirich thought they had dragged him into the dirt. Instead, they had given him the high ground. By the time the plane touched down, the story had become international news. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, all were carrying headlines. Passenger removed from first class in apparent racial incident. Video goes viral. And then, one blog broke the story that changed everything. Passenger in viral Skirich video identified as Jordan Ellis, CEO of Summit Capital, investor behind pending $120 million lifeline deal. The world gasped. The man they had humiliated was not just any passenger. He was the very lifeline Skirich Airlines depended on for survival. Inside the arrivals hall, Jordan walked tall, his leather case gripped in steady hands. Passengers whispered, pointing, phone snapping furtively. A woman in her 20s gasped aloud. "That's him. He's the investor. He's the guy from the video." Jordan didn't flinch. His expression was composed, his steps measured, but inside his chest thundered a vow. This isn't over. This has only begun. Outside, a black sedan waited for him. The driver bowed respectfully. "Mr. Ellis, the CEO of Skirich has sent a car for you." The irony wasn't lost on him. Hours earlier, their crew had forced him out of his seat. Now their leader was sending cars. The reversal had already begun. At Skirich headquarters, Graham Lockwood's voice thundered to the conference room. "He can't be allowed to spin this. He'll use it against us. We push the narrative that he's unstable, manipulative. He staged this." But the PR team sat pale-faced, their phones lighting up with headlines and hashtags. "Sir," one finally said, voice trembling, "it's too late. The evidence is everywhere. The public is on his side." Graham's fist slammed onto the table. But he knew, deep down, the truth. For the first time in years, the power was slipping out of his hands. In his hotel suite that night, Jordan sat at a polished desk, watching the news feeds roll across his screen. His face was reflected in the glass, steady and unreadable. His mother's words returned to him, whispering through the years. "Stand tall. Always." And Jordan knew. This was no longer about one seat, one flight, one humiliation. This was about $120 million. About dignity. About justice. About making sure no one else would ever be erased the way they had tried to erase him. Jordan Ellis leaned forward, his fingers steepled. "They think I'm finished," he murmured to the empty room. "But tomorrow they'll learn who I really am." The city skyline glittered outside the hotel's panoramic windows, but Jordan Ellis barely noticed. He sat at the head of a long mahogany conference table in the suite's private meeting room, jacket draped neatly over the back of his chair, shirt sleeves rolled up. His leather briefcase rested beside him, now open, files neatly arranged like weapons ready for war. Around him, his inner circle leaned forward in their chairs. Tiana Brooks, Summit Capital's COO, sharp-eyed and unflinching. Naomi Park, head of investigations, her arms crossed over a stack of damning files. Victor Nguyen, the legal strategist, flipping through notes with calm precision. And on a screen dialed in from New York, Ethan Shah, Summit's cybersecurity chief, surrounded by a wall of glowing monitors. Jordan clasped his hands together, his voice steady. "They humiliated me in first class. That was their mistake. But their greater mistake was underestimating what happens next. We're not reacting. We're going on the offensive. Naomi slid a thick file across the table. Skirich has skeletons everywhere. I pulled employee complaints from the past decade. At least 5 cases accuse Graham Lockwood of discrimination, buried under NDAs and quiet payouts. Jordan's jaw tightened. He flipped through the pages, eyes flashing. The language was eerily familiar, passed over for promotion due to race, treated as less valuable than white colleagues, forcibly reseated on a company flight. "These stories aren't just mine," Jordan murmured, his voice low, almost reverent. "They're everyone's. We'll bring them into the light." Victor leaned in, tapping his pen against the table. "Legally, we have grounds for a class action if we want it. But in the court of public opinion, these files are dynamite." On the screen, Ethan's voice crackled. "Jordan, I've got chatter inside Skirich's internal servers. Their PR team is scrambling, trying to paint you as disruptive. Graham's fingerprints are all over the directive. He ordered staff to spread the story." Jordan's eyes narrowed. "Good. The more they lie, the deeper they bury themselves. Document every trace. Emails, calls, texts, I want it all." Ethan smirked faintly. "Already ahead of you. If they try to erase the files, I'll catch them red-handed." Tiana leaned forward, her voice calm but urgent. "The boardroom's going to be in panic mode. Our $120 million was their last lifeline. They know if we walk, they sink. What's the play?" Jordan steepled his fingers, the faintest smile curling at the corner of his mouth. "We don't just walk away. We make them choose, reform, or ruin. We demand Graham's removal, systemic change, oversight on every policy. If they refuse, Summit not only pulls out, we take the evidence public and let the market finish them." Naomi raised an eyebrow. "That would gut them." Jordan's eyes burned. "Exactly." A chime sounded. Jordan's phone lit with a new message. He glanced down. Unknown number. "I was on flight 1976. My name is Jenna Patel. I'm a flight attendant. I'll testify. Graham ordered us to push you out of your seat, but I'm afraid of losing my job." Jordan's lips pressed into a thin, cold line. He looked up at his team. "We got our whistleblower." Tiana exhaled slowly. "That's the nail in the coffin." Jordan turned toward Naomi. "Protect her. Secure her testimony. If they try to silence her, I want the world to know before they take a step." Naomi nodded firmly. Across town, at Skirich headquarters, the atmosphere was chaos. Graham Lockwood stormed into the PR suite, his voice shaking with fury. "I don't care what the passengers recorded. Spin it. Say he was belligerent. Say other customers were uncomfortable. Flood the feeds with doubt." The PR director shifted nervously. "Sir, the videos all show him calm. The public won't buy it. And the board is—" "Forget the board." Graham roared, slamming his fist on the table. "This is about control. Ellis is a nobody who got lucky. I won't let him destroy me." But in truth, the fear gnawed at him. He could feel power slipping, the ground beneath him giving way. That night, Jordan appeared live on CNN. He wore a navy suit, his posture calm, his face illuminated under the studio lights. The anchor leaned forward. "Mr. Ellis, the world has seen the video of you being removed from first class. Skirich says you were disruptive. How do you respond?" Jordan looked straight into the camera, his voice steady but searing with quiet power. "I wasn't disruptive. I was humiliated, not for my behavior, not for my ticket, but for who I am. And I stayed calm because I knew the truth would speak louder than any anger. This isn't just about me. This is about every traveler who's been told they don't belong, about every professional who's had to prove themselves twice over because of the color of their skin, and about an airline that thought they could get away with it." The studio fell silent. Even the anchor paused, visibly moved. Social media exploded within seconds. The clips shared millions of times with the hashtag #StandWithEllis. At the same time, Jordan's legal team released the first piece of evidence, an audio clip of Graham Lockwood's voice, sharp and commanding. "I don't care what his ticket says. That seat belongs to Preston Hale. Cause trouble if you have to." The internet erupted. Headlines blared across every outlet. Steerage VP caught ordering passengers removal. Whistleblower flight attendant confirms racial bias in viral incident. Investor humiliated. Airline's $120 million deal in jeopardy. Steerage's stock nosedived another 10% overnight. Inside the boardroom, the director sat pale and grim. Margaret Doyle, the sharp-tongued veteran, slammed her pen against the table. We've lost $800 million in market value in 3 days. Corporate clients are canceling contracts. This is existential. Lockwood has to go. Arthur Beaumont, the weary CO, rubbed his temples. If we fire him, we admit guilt. If we keep him, Margaret shot back, we admit suicide. The room fell into uneasy silence. Meanwhile, Jordan returned to his suite, exhaustion tugging at his bones. He stood before the wide glass window, the city glowing beneath him, 1,000 lights flickering like eyes. He whispered to himself, "This isn't about one seat anymore. This is about tearing down a wall they thought would stand forever." Behind him, Naomi stacked more files on the desk. 7 more former employees ready to testify. And we have a supplier confirming Graham took bribes. Jordan exhaled slowly, his shoulders squaring. Then it's over. Tomorrow, the board won't just face a choice. They'll face judgment. Across the city, Graham poured whiskey into a glass with shaking hands. He stared at the glowing TV, where Jordan's calm face filled the screen. His jaw clenched so tight it hurt. "He's not going to win," Graham muttered to himself. "He's not." But the world had already chosen. And deep down, Graham knew it. By dawn, newspapers hit the stands. Steerage board faces reckoning as evidence mounts. Investor Ellis demands reform in airline industry. Jordan Ellis had gone from humiliated passenger to the face of a movement. And Steerage Airlines, once arrogant and untouchable, was now hanging by a thread Jordan himself held in his hand. Gray twilight draped the city like a veil as Jordan Ellis stepped out of the sleek black sedan. Ahead of him, the glass tower of Steerage Airlines rose like a monument. 38 floors glittering with light, but trembling under the weight of scandal. He adjusted his tie, deep navy silk, sharp against his crisp white shirt, and gripped his leather briefcase. Every eye in the lobby turned as he entered. Executives in suits froze mid-conversation. Staff whispering corners. Phones discreetly lifted to capture the moment. The man they had humiliated in seat 2A now walked through their doors not as a passenger, but as judge and jury. 2 security guards blocked the elevator, one raising a hand. "Sir, we need to confirm your—" The door slid open. Arthur Beaumont, CEO of Steerage, stepped out, his silver hair mussed, his face drawn with sleepless guilt. His voice cracked as he extended his hand. "Mr. Ellis, I sincerely apologize for everything." Jordan clasped it firmly, his eyes unblinking. "You don't apologize to me. You apologize to every employee and passenger you failed to protect." Arthur swallowed hard, then gestured. "Please, the board is waiting." The boardroom was a cathedral of glass and steel, sunlight bleeding through floor-to-ceiling windows. A long, polished table stretched across the room, directors seated in stiff silence. At the far end sat Graham Lockwood, collar askew, sweat dampening his expensive suit. His eyes flicked up as Jordan entered, venom burning behind them. Jordan placed his briefcase on the table with a deliberate thud. The sound echoed like a gavel striking wood. He remained standing, letting the silence settle like smoke before he spoke. "I didn't come here for theatrics. I came here for truth. And the truth is this. You don't have a PR crisis. You have a rot in your foundation. And that rot has a name, Graham Lockwood." Gasps rippled through the room. Graham lurched forward, voice strained. "This is outrageous. He staged this. Jordan lifted a hand, cutting him off without raising his voice. "Save it." He opened his briefcase and pulled out a tablet. Pressing play. The room filled with Graham's voice, sharp and unmistakable. "I don't care what his ticket says. That seat belongs to Preston Hale. Cause trouble if you have to." The directors stiffened, several covering their mouths. Margaret Doyle, the steely veteran, turned her cold eyes on Graham, but Jordan wasn't finished. He tapped again. A second recording played. Graham threatening Jenna Patel, the flight attendant. If you open your mouth, your career is over. The silence that followed was crushing. Jordan's gaze swept the table, his voice low but resonant. You invited me here for a $120 million deal. But I won't save a company that tolerates this kind of culture. So here is my condition. Lockwood goes permanently, and Skirich commits to systemic reform, oversight on hiring, training, passenger treatment. If not, my money walks. And when it does, so will your shareholders. Graham sprang from his chair, voice cracking with desperation. You can't do this. He's using humiliation as leverage. He wants control of Skirich. Margaret's voice sliced through the air. No, Graham. You wanted control. You ordered a paying passenger out of seat. You turned arrogance into policy. And now, you've turned our company into a global disgrace. Arthur Beaumont lowered his face into his hands. God help us. The room was tense as steel. Then Margaret raised her hand. I call for vote. Hands rose one by one. For removal. For reform. Against Graham. When the final hand lifted, Graham's face went chalk white. His seat of power was gone. He slammed his fist on the table. You're fools. You think fire me saved this place? You think Ellis is your savior? You'll regret this. He stormed from the room, the slam of the door reverberating like a final verdict. Arthur exhaled, his voice shaking. Mr. Ellis, the board accepts your terms. We will create an independent oversight committee. We will begin reform immediately. Please give Skirich another chance. Jordan looked around the room, at the pale faces of the directors, at the broken pride in Arthur's eyes. Slowly, he nodded. This isn't about saving Skirich. It's about proving dignity is non-negotiable. You have one chance. Don't waste it. He gathered his briefcase and turned for the door. Downstairs, cameras flashed as Jordan stepped out of the tower. Reporters surged forward, microphones raised. Mr. Ellis, will you still invest? Are you suing Skirich? Do you believe the scandal represents the entire airline industry? Jordan paused on the steps, the city humming behind him. He looked directly into the sea of lenses, his voice steady, carrying like thunder. I didn't fight this battle for myself alone. I fought it for everyone who has ever been told they don't belong in a place they earned. For every traveler pushed aside, every employee silenced. Dignity isn't a privilege. It's a right. And today, Skirich learned that the hard way. The crowd erupted. The hashtag surged again. Hashtag Justice for Jordan, now joined by hashtag Skirich Reforms. That night, in the quiet of his hotel suite, Jordan stood at the window overlooking the city. His reflection stared back. Not just a CEO, not just an investor, but a man who had turned humiliation into a weapon of truth. His phone buzzed. A message from his mother's old friend, Mrs. Carter, who had watched the coverage. Alma will be proud of you. You stood tall. Always. Jordan closed his eyes, the words like a benediction. He whispered into the silence, Thank you, Mom. This was for you. For all of us. The next morning, headlines blared across the world. Skirich VP ousted after viral scandal. Investor Ellis demands sweeping reform. Humiliation in first class costs Airline $120 million, forces historic change. From passenger to power broker, Jordan Ellis redefines justice at 30,000 feet. Skirich stock rebounded slightly, buoyed by the promise of reform. But the damage was done. Graham Lockwood's career was finished. And Jordan Ellis had not only salvaged dignity from humiliation, he had reshaped an industry. In the end, it wasn't just about C2A. It was about every seat, every person, every moment when someone was told they didn't belong. Jordan Ellis had taken his place. Not just in first class, not just in the boardroom, but in history. And as he prepared to fly home, this time seated at the front of the cabin with quiet authority, he knew one thing with unshakable certainty. They could never erase him again. If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.